Welcome to the 33rd chapter of the book of 2nd Chronicles. We are beginning from when we left off at the end of 32, Chronicles 32. We went in and did all the chapters of Isaiah because Isaiah lived during that time through Hezekiah, and he went to Hezekiah, and it doesn't mention him being after Hezekiah with Hezekiah's son Manasseh, who we begin with right here. So now we will continue till the end of 2nd Chronicles, where Israel is taken to Babylon, and then we will begin with Jeremiah, who lives during that time, not yet, but he will be during the reign of Josiah, who is Manasseh's grandson. The name Manasseh is the same as the tribe, so if you go into a lexical concordance looking up, trying to find the person Manasseh, you have to go through all the Manassehs from all of the tribes of Israel. It gets kind of confusing, just to let you know if you decide to do that. But there's not very much outside of what's here in 2 Kings about Manasseh, who was the son of Hezekiah. And it begins, Manasseh was a son being decaduo years old. The deca is 10. We have a decade. And theo is duo. Decatheo is 12. 10 and 2 is 12. In his taking reign. In 55 years he reigned in Jerusalem. Penti conta pente. We know the Pentecost, so that comes from this. The Penticonta, Pentecost, is 50, and Pente is 5, 55. You're going to add that to your English derivatives book. And so Manasseh reigned 55 years. He's the longest reigning monarch in the line of either Israel or Judah, both of them combined. He has the longest reign. He began when he was 12 years old. Now, I believe he might have been reigning, some people believe, during the end of Hezekiah's reign. But it says, and he did the wicked thing before the Lord, according to all the abominations of the ethnic, the nations, whom are nations which the Lord removed from in front of the sons of Israel. So Israel at this time was deeply into idolatry. Hezekiah was a righteous king and destroyed many of the places that they were sacrificing to these idols and having these rites of idolatry. But now Manasseh is now going to bring them back. He did the wicked thing before the Lord, and they're according to the nation, so they picked up these idols, starting with actually Solomon, who married women from the surrounding nations and then built little temples for the wife, his favorite wives, and these temples were to these other gods that the wife came from, the nation the wife came from. So here, many, many years later, I don't know, 1,000 years later, or someplace like that, 800 years later, the nation is taken over by these idols, idolatry. In Manasseh, he returned and built the high places, which Hezekiah, his patir, tore down. Paternal comes from that word. And he set up altars to the Baal, the Baalim in the Greek. The Baals were, I believe, gods of over towards Tyre and Sidon. And he made sacred groves where they would go into these wooded areas and had probably altars, and I don't know what all they did, but it wasn't what God wanted mainly. So, and they did obeisance to all the military of the heaven. The stratias, military, generally what that means are the stars of the heaven, and the stars dealing with the military. Somehow, in these times, the rulers with generals and advisors would look at the stars to determine whether they should attack or not attack, and so forth. So they were doing this in Israel, and they served to them. Astrology would be similar to that. That would be the determining your future by the stars, but that wasn't really tied in so much into the military. And he built altars in the house of the Lord, in which the Lord said, "My name will be in Jerusalem." So he built these altars in the house of the Lord. Can you imagine? And this beautiful house, and so now we have these other altars alongside of the altar of the Lord, in which the Lord said, "My name will be in Jerusalem," into the Iona. And he built altars to all the military of the heaven in the two courtyards of the house of the Lord. So the courtyards now have altars to the stars, constellations maybe. They did obeisance to the stars in the heaven, which God's told them not to do. Iku, you have economy, comes from that, the law of the house. And he led his children in Piri, fire, pyromania, in the ground of the son of Hinnom. And this is called Gehenna. Jesus mentions Gehenna, and it was a place of sacrificing the babies. You say, it's a pretty terrible thing to do and put them in these fires, but yet today in the United States there's just millions of babies being slaughtered by abortions, and it's just really horrible. And God is going to pour out his wrath on this country because of these things. He owes it to the righteousness that he proclaims to destroy the unrighteous. Thank God that right now is a respite with the current president we have, who is following the things of God and having Bible studies in the White House. But I believe it's just a postponement until he's gone and the people that don't want that come back and rule and go back into doing all these abominations in the United States. And he prognosticated and foretold and administered potions and established ones who deliver oracles and enchanters. Before we go into that with this Gehenna, I looked it up in Wikipedia, and it says that the Valley of Hinnom is the modern name for the valley surrounding Jerusalem's old city, including Mount Zion from the west and south. And it meets and merges with the Kidron Valley, the other principal valley around the old city near the southeastern corner of the city. We'll go to a map here in a little bit and point these places out. But he prognosticated and foretold. I had to look the difference up in the dictionary, but basically they're the same, prognosticate and foretell, except the prognostication, they used some type of device to foretell. They both predicted and forecasted the future, but the prognosticator looked at something like tea leaves. The Greeks look at coffee grounds and turn the cups upside down. The coffee grounds run down because they put the grounds right into the water. And administered potions. And so, I don't know, I look at today the potions being basically marijuana is a potion that are psychotic drugs, uppers and downers, that affect a person's mental state. And so these potions that would affect the people's mental state were being administered at that time by Hezekiah and the ones who he gave to do that, and established ones who deliver oracles. And an oracle usually had to do with foretelling what a person should or shouldn't do, sort of like astrology, except these were generally at places where there was something like steam coming out of the river, out of the ground, or some type of a natural occurrence. It was natural, but it was unusual, and they would determine that was something that a god or goddess was doing, causing, and so therefore they would go there and have a priesthood who would see what was going on and would deliver oracles to whoever would come there. And enchanters, and an enchanter would be basically somebody that's seduced using magic. He would seduce another person into doing something or telling him how he should live his life. And we have a lot of enchanters today, especially in the United States, on television. They're called talking heads, and people that give all sorts of information a lot of times, and most of the times it's wrong, and yet they will tell you what is true or supposedly what's the right thing going on, and a lot of it's political, some of it's religious. And he multiplied to do the wicked thing before the Lord. So he did more and more to provoke him to anger. So God became very angry at the things of Manasseh. And Manasseh put the carved and the molten image which he made in the house of God, in which God said to David and to Solomon his son, in this house and in Jerusalem, which I chose from out of all the tribes of Israel, I will put my name there into the eon. So these carved images, some type of a wooden statue, and a molten image of bronze or iron, and he put these also in the house of God, along with the altars. And I shall not proceed to shake the foot of Israel from the land of which I gave to their fathers, if only they guard to do all the things which I gave charge to them. And this is what he said he would do. He would guard them according to all the law and the orders and the judgments given by the hand of Moses. He would protect them. He's saying right here. And Manasseh misled Judah and the ones dwelling in Jerusalem. So a ruler that can mislead can lead a nation down the road to destruction, which Manasseh did, to act wickedly above all the nations which the Lord removed from in front of the sons of Israel. And so Israel now is more wicked than the other nations. It's taking the gods of all these nations and bringing them in, putting them in the temple, getting rid of the Jehovah God, and starting up these rituals and rites with these idols in the holy place, with actual idols there and altars which they would burn incense, and I'm not sure exactly what else they burnt, but they burnt them to these gods. And the Lord spoke with Manasseh and unto his people, and they did not listen. So apparently there was a prophet sent to the people in Manasseh. Maybe Isaiah was still around by this time, and told them the things at the end of Manasseh, which at the end of the book of Isaiah, which he speaks and says, and the Lord led upon them the rulers of the force of the king of Assyria. Now, this part here is not mentioned in the book of Kings, nor in history, but apparently Esarhaddon is probably the king by this time. Sennacherib was probably dead, and Esarhaddon was up in Assyria towards the end of the Assyrian Empire, and they overtook Manasseh in bonds and tied him in shackles and led him into Babylon. Now, Babylon was a vassal state of the Assyrians. The people in Babylon were people that lived in between Babylon and the Chaldees, which was down in the southern part where the Tigris and Euphrates ran out into the ocean. And the Chaldeans later came up, took over Babylon, and then defeated the Assyrians 50 years from here. And as he was afflicted, Manasseh, he sought the face of the Lord his God, and was humbled exceedingly from in front of the God of his fathers. And he prayed to him, that is, Manasseh prayed to Jehovah, and heeded him, and God heeded his yelling, and returned him unto Jerusalem over his kingdom. And Manasseh knew that the Lord, he is God. And that's a wonderful thing that happens here, that Manasseh sees the things that he did, how he recognizes the things that he did, and he prays to God, and the Lord heeds him. Happened to me. I walked away from the Lord for 13 years, but then when I saw, like Manasseh, all the things that were happening that were bad, I knew I did wrong by leaving, and I asked him to come back, to take me, return me to him, in which he drew me to him, and I've been with him ever since. And this was in December the 30th, 1979. And Manasseh knew that the Lord, he is God. So he knew it. I was just reading in the news, there was I'm not sure, a football or basketball player that grew up knowing who the Lord was, but yet when he became a professional, went into the pros, he walked away from God. And he did something, he ended up in jail, and he realized that everything that he did by leaving the Lord was a disaster, and so he returned to the Lord Jesus Christ. So most everybody watching these videos are probably not in that position, but if you know anybody that is, you can always tell them the things of God, that if they do come back, acknowledge God in their sin, that he will bring them back, return them to him. And after these things, he built a wall outside the city of David. The city of David was Zion. That was one area of Jerusalem of the time. From the southwest of Gihon, by the rushing stream going forth by the fishing gate, a circuit to Ophel, and raised it high exceedingly. And we'll go to a map here. There's Jerusalem, and the fish gate is up here. Ophel is here. So something going around. Down below was a valley of Gehenna, where they burnt the trash and everything, and where they were sacrificing at the time. And the Ophel was an area of Jerusalem. And I don't see Zion on here. I think Zion was over here someplace. Unless I'm missing it. I don't see it. But anyway, that is the Jerusalem. This was in Nehemiah's day, but that would have been similar to this because Nehemiah came back and it was basically the same city, even though it was in ruins. So he placed rulers and of the force of the army in all the walled cities in Judah. So he went around and sent rulers, generals, and they took over the cities to protect them. And he removed the gods of the aliens and the carved image from out of the house of the Lord, and all the altars which he built on the mountain of the house of the Lord and in Jerusalem. So he now is removing everything that he put in there. I put this underlined, there should be a space. And he cast them outside the city. And he set up the altar of the Lord and sacrificed upon it a sacrifice of deliverance offering and a praise offering, and told Judah to serve to the Lord God of Israel. And I'm sure the Levites were the ones that actually did it, but he set this up to happen. Only still the people sacrificed upon the high places, except now to the Lord their God. So they kept these places where they could go, and but yet they no longer served to the Baalim, but to the Jehovah. And the rest of the words of Manasseh and his prayer to God, and the words of the seers speaking to him. So now we see these Oron tone, who are telling him that could be one of them could have been Isaiah. In the name of the Lord God of Israel, behold, they are written upon the words of the kings of Israel. In his prayer, and as God heeded him, and all his sins and his defections, and the places upon which he built on them the high places, and established there sacred groves and carved images before he returned, behold, they are written by the words of the seers. And Manasseh slept with his fathers, and they entombed him in the garden of his house. And Amon his son reigned instead of him. So it says in Jeremiah 15:4, this is much after the time of Manasseh, but God says, and I will deliver them up, this Israel, for distresses to all the kingdoms of the earth, because of Manasseh, son of Hezekiah, king of Judah, for all which he did to Jerusalem, and that's Jeremiah 15:4. So he had a bad name, but yet he did come, at the end he turned. Solomon was the opposite. He was a good king, and then he turned to the idolatry. We may see Manasseh being in with Abraham's bosom, where Solomon may not. And then Amon, his son, was a son being 22 years old in his taking reign. In 2 years he reigned in Jerusalem. Not very long, just a few years. And he did the wicked thing before the Lord, as did Manasseh his father. And to all the idols which Manasseh his father made, Amon sacrificed and served to them. So now he's returning them back to wherever they were, I suppose. And he was not humbled before the Lord, as Manasseh his father was humbled. For his son Amon, that's Manasseh's son Amon, multiplied in trespassing. And his servants attacked him, Amon, and struck Amon in his house. But the people of the land struck the ones attacking against King Amon. So they were, the assassins were then killed by the people, and the people of the land gave rain to Eosion, his son, instead of him. Chapter 34 will continue with Josiah, a good king. Interesting things that happens with Josiah, the reforms of Josiah. I hope you'll join us in chapter 34 and continue in the ending here of 2 Chronicles. And till the next time, God bless.